Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is David Cashman. I'm from SEB Housing, and this is the information session for the affordable units at Stockbridge Landing in Scituate. So when we do these information sessions, we're doing them on YouTube Live. People are encouraged to ask questions. To do so, please type them into the chat box to the right of the screen where you see me. I'm going to just type something there right now so you can see what I'm talking about. There's also a concurrent call. So if anyone didn't get that notice, you can call in. We have a group call going. So if you'd rather be on there and be able to ask your questions over the phone, that's fine. I just ask that if you do both, sometimes if people are on the call and they're watching YouTube, I can hear myself through the call, which gets a little distracting. So if anyone does that, I'll just kind of let you know. But questions are encouraged, okay? My plan is to kind of go through what I think are some of the bigger, more salient points about the program. There's a lot to cover if we were going to go through everything. Too much. So I do not intend for this information session to cover every single aspect of this program or this development. We'd be here all night. But I do want to try and touch on some of the bigger ones, hoping that that's helpful to you. If you haven't already, I would recommend going to the SEB Housing website. You can find a lot of important and relevant information on our website. Let me just type that in here, www.sebhousing.com. If you go on there, you can scroll to affordable housing opportunities and then click on I want to buy, and then you'll find the link for Stockbridge Landing. You can click on that link and that will take you to another page. And on that page, you'll find a little bit more description about the development, a photo, you'll find a sample deed rider, and you can also find the information packet and the application, which are downloadable. For the application, that may be convenient. You can download it, maybe print it, fill it out. You'll see on the application there are various ways to get the application to us. You can mail it to us at our office in Needham. You can come by the office in Needham. We have a 24-hour secure drop box, the blue drop box, right outside our office. So if you want to come over here, you're welcome to do so. You can email it to us. You can fax it to us. So there's a number of ways you can get it to us, kind of whatever works best for you. We'll try and make it easy for you by providing a number of options for getting the application to us. So yeah, if you haven't already, recommend navigating to our website and to this opportunity. Most of what I'll be going over tonight is from the information packet. After attending this session, I recommend taking a look at the information packet. Like I said, I can't cover everything in there. We'd be here forever, which I don't think anyone would enjoy. But so take a look. There's a lot of information in there. We try and answer a lot of the sort of most common questions that come up in the information packet. Just a note before we kind of jump into some of the nitty-gritty. SEB Housing is an off-site affordable housing lottery consultant. We're located in Needham. We're not in Scituate. We're not part of the development team, which is Dakota Partners. We get contracted by them to help facilitate the affordable housing, certain aspects of the affordable housing program at this development, including by marketing the units, holding this information session, hosting the lottery eventually, and really working with all the households who are interested and who apply. We're really your main point of contact all the way up through the lottery. And we do stay involved all the way up through the sale of the home, although more peripherally once the lottery is over. But just an important distinction to keep in mind that we're not ownership, we're not the developer, we're not the sales team, we're an off-site affordable housing consultant. And in that vein, I've seen photos, floor plans, and the like of the property. I haven't been there. Perhaps you have. It looks like a beautiful property. They have a wonderful website. I would also, if you haven't done that, definitely recommend taking a look at their website, which is, actually, let me just put that in. Pretty easy, actually, just stockbridgelanding.com. So yeah, take a look there. You can read about the development team, some of the different people involved. You can see photos, you can see videos, you can read a little bit more about the town of Scituate, floor plans. A lot of information that you might be interested in is on their website. But just to give you a little bit of background, we already had one lottery for affordable units at this development. In total, there is planned to be 17 affordable units out of, I think, 68 homeownership units in total at the development. 7 of the affordable units are already sold or under contract, and this is now a second lottery. Okay, so we already ran one lottery. This lottery is going to cover the next installment of 4 units. Once those units are all under agreement, we will then have a third and probably final lottery for units coming online after that. So these 4 homes will be sold at affordable prices to households who make up to 80% of the area median income. And we'll talk in a moment about what that is. They feature, so there's a comment from Sophie, VOY. I'm not sure I understand that acronym. Sophie, could you spell that out so I can respond in case that would be helpful? So these homes feature 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, private entryways, and a front porch, and are about 1,200 square feet. The flooring is vinyl plank in the foyer, the kitchen, the living room, the mudroom, and the dining room. Then there's vinyl flooring in the bathrooms and laundry rooms. But then the bedrooms, lofts, upper hallways, and staircase are carpeted. Kitchens have laminate countertops and black Frigidaire appliances, including a dishwasher and microwave. And the residences have 2 zones of heat and AC as well. Hot water is provided by a tankless water heater. So all 4 units that are being offered in this lottery are type F1 units. Okay, I've actually posted those on our website. So if you haven't been able to see floor plans yet, go to the SCB Housing website. You can see them there. You can also find floor plans on Stockbridge Landing's website, and I believe the F1 is the Norwell, but it says it right on it as well, so you can find that one and take a look at it. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. The affordable sales price is $312,200 with condo fees of $161 a month. There's 1 garage parking space and 1 surface space. As I understand it, market rate units at this development start at about $800,000. So there's a pretty high delta between the affordable price and the market rate price, and hence there's actually been quite a bit of interest in affordable units at this development. I know the first lottery was pretty popular and units sold up fairly quickly. And I expect that ones in this phase will as well. The monthly condo fees cover administrative fees, maintenance and care of the development's common areas, which includes landscaping, snow and waste removal. There's a wastewater treatment plant here, okay? So it's not town sewer. They also, those fees cover taxes and insurance, probably not for individual units, for sort of common taxes and insurance. So let's jump in a little bit to some of the eligibility criteria for this program, for these units and this program. And let me just say too, actually, I mentioned that the affordable sales prices were $312,200, and you don't need to know sort of the mechanism or the formula by which those get calculated, but in case you're interested, they basically get calculated based on the area median incomes, which HUD publishes every year, usually in the spring. HUD publishes them for every state and various geographic regions within each state. Massachusetts has a handful of different geographic regions. Scituate is in what's called the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy area. And essentially, sales prices get set based off of a hypothetical household with 3 members earning 80% of the area median income. And ideally, according to the formula, that household would not be spending more than 30% of their income on the costs of home ownership, which include your principal and interest and taxes and PMI and condo fees and a number of other things. So it's probably more information than you needed, but I think maybe the important thing to remember is that in this program, which includes this development, affordable units get, the sales prices get calculated pursuant to this formula, not pursuant to any particular applicant's income or assets. So they don't fluctuate depending on who the affordable buyer is. Let's talk more broadly about the eligibility criteria. So the first is everyone in the household must qualify as a first-time home buyer. The entire household's income and assets must be below the applicable limits. Households must be pre-approved for a mortgage, which they must submit with their lottery application. And finally, households or their family members cannot have a financial interest in the development, and they can't be what's called a related party, which is generally a person who is related to or employed by the developer, which again is Dakota Partners. So if you're related to someone who works at Dakota Partners, or you somehow work for Dakota Partners, that would be a disqualifying factor you'd have to list on your application. And also that prohibition extends to spouses and family members of that person. So if you work for Dakota Partners, that would similarly disqualify a spouse or a parent or a sibling or someone else. So there's a question on the application where you have to answer whether you're a related party or if you have some financial interest in this development. Let's go through those major criteria, the main sort of eligibility points in a little bit more detail. The first is that everyone in the household has to be a first-time home buyer, which means that they haven't owned a home within the past 3 years, not at any point in time that they haven't owned a home within the last 3 years. So if no one has owned a home since 2018, you're okay. If you owned it in 2016 and you sold it, you're all right. But if you owned it in 2018 or 2019, that could be a disqualifying factor unless, or if you own it now too, unless you meet one of the exceptions. There are 5 exceptions total. 2 of them, I think, virtually never come up. You can read about them in the information packet, so I'm not going to spend time covering them. But the 3 kind of exceptions that we do see sometimes, these are exceptions to the rule that prohibits people from having owned a home within the past 3 years. Because again, the general rule is nobody can have owned a home within the past 3 years, but if you meet one of the exceptions, you may get around it. Those exceptions are for age-qualified households. So if you're age 55 or over, then you meet the exception, okay? You could have owned a home in the past 3 years. That would not bar you. If you are a single parent, you can meet the exception. So if you've owned a home with a spouse in the past 3 years, but now you're separated, you no longer own the home, you have at least joint custody of a child, that would allow you to get around to qualify for the exception. And Matthew, I see your question. Give me 1 second. The third exception is for displaced homemakers, someone who worked primarily over the last couple of years without remuneration in the household, childcare, other things like that, but not getting paid. that person, owned a home with the partner, but has now divorced from the partner and no longer owns the home. That would be another way of getting around the rule that prohibits people from having owned a home in the last 3 years. That's a third exception. Okay. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah. So Matt, you can watch. You can come back and watch it whenever you want. It'll be on there. So those are the exceptions. Again, there's 5 in total. I covered the 3 that come up with the most frequency, but take a look at the information packet. Now, I should say as well, even if you meet one of the exceptions, okay, even if you meet one of the exceptions, so you're 60 years old, you meet the exception of being over the age of 55, you own a home currently, that's okay though, because you meet one of the exceptions. You can't still own it at the time you go to kind of move forward in this process after the lottery. So before you could sign a purchase and sale on an affordable home at Stockbridge Landing, your current home would have to be under P&S. Okay, and that same thing applies for displaced homemakers or single parents, right? So even if you meet the exception, you can't own a home at the time. You can't own 2 homes, basically, is the rule. You can't own a current home and an affordable home. So even if you meet one of those exceptions, your current home would need to be at least under P&S by the time you signed a P&S for one of the affordable units, which implicitly means that you may own it right now. You just would have to make arrangements to sell it if you're going to end up buying one of these units by a point relatively close in time to when we run the lottery. Let's talk about, so that kind of as much as I think I need to say about the first sort of major criteria of eligibility in this program, which is everyone qualifying as a first-time home buyer. Let's move on to income and assets. So this is an affordable housing program and units are being sold at prices significantly less than their market rate counterparts. Probably comes as no surprise that households have to meet income and asset restrictions. Let's talk first about income. The income limits are based on the number of people in the household. Again, you don't have to write these down. You don't have to memorize these. These numbers are in the informational materials. They're in the application. They're on our website, so I'll just say them. You don't have to memorize them, but they are for a household size of 1, $70,750. For a household size of 2, it's $80,850. For a household size of 3, it's $90,950. And for a household size of 4, it's $101,050. Household income is the total anticipated money that they'll earn over the next 12 months, starting from the date of application and moving forward. So that's necessarily somewhat of an imperfect science, but that's how the program says where to count income. It's not just a retroactive, what did you make last year or the year before? Now, we have to factor in that stuff because what you've been making is the best evidence and predictor of what you'll make moving forward. But the calculation for purposes of your eligibility is what is the current household's and recent income earnings suggest they will make over the next 12 months. All income sources are counted from all household members with the exception of minors. So a 15-year-old kid, let's say, minors under the age of 18. 15-year-old kid, let's say, is a real go-getter and has a part-time job on the side and they make $5,000 a year. Well, that doesn't count towards the income limit. You're okay. Or I shouldn't say you're okay. It just doesn't count towards the income limit. Also, full-time students who are dependents, we do not count anything over $480. So if you have a full-time dependent child who's going to be living in the household, they're a full-time student. On top of that, they work. They're also a real go-getter. They make $10,000 a year. Well, we only count $480 of that. The remaining, what is it, 9,900 and whatever it is, doesn't count towards the income limit. Generally, you have to assume households will continue to earn any monies they've been earning unless there's a documented pattern or documentation showing otherwise. This comes up sometimes where you have to provide your last 5 pay stubs, and the last 5 pay stubs show that a household has been working overtime, or that they received a bonus. And we generally have to assume that overtime or that bonus will continue to be received in future years. Now, there are exceptions to that, like one that comes up sometimes is for, if someone got a bonus but then had a written document from their employer that says we are absolutely unequivocally abolishing our bonus program from here going forward. Well, that's something we could consider. The household's own statement, I don't think I'm going to qualify for a bonus next year, that we can't factor in. Or, something from the employer maybe saying, in no circumstances will we permit anyone to work overtime next year. Well, that might be something we can consider, but a household's own statement, I don't plan to work overtime moving forward, is not something that we can consider. Seasonal employees, sometimes they are households where, they might work a ton in certain parts of the year. If we were just to extrapolate from what they worked in their busiest months, that wouldn't really be reflective of what they usually earn over the entire year, factoring in their slower months. So for those households, we can sort of factor in a bigger period of time, looking at the full year. Extrapolating out just from the busiest months wouldn't really capture what they typically make if they're seasonal. Households have to provide their 3 most recent tax returns. A little bit more about income. Income in this program is calculated pretty broadly and can include things that we don't typically think of as income, can include things that are not even taxable income. So it is very much to your benefit when you are submitting an application to go through the income table on page 8 and take your time and fill it out closely. So I see a question there, Mark. Give me 1 second and I'm going to come back to you. So there are various sources of income in the table. That's there for your benefit, to make sure that you don't overlook something, because there are various sources of income that we have to count. Now, there are the kind of obvious ones, like what you make at your job from your employer, and you have to provide your 5 most recent pay stubs for us to look at. But you may be self-employed as well. You may receive child support or alimony or Social Security or Social Security disability. You might be drawing down regularly from a pension or getting retirement distributions. You might get unemployment compensation or workman's compensation. Maybe you even get periodic payments from family members or friends. And that one actually comes up sometimes. Maybe you have an asset that generates some income. Bank accounts don't usually generate much. Sometimes things like certificates of deposit do a little bit better. Maybe you get dividends or interest from stock that you hold. So we do need to count interest income. Maybe you have some other totally different source of income, but go through the table closely. It would be, just unfortunate if, you try and be really careful about it and you're thinking about what you make at your job and one other sort of thing that you think of as income, but you totally overlook some other source, and then you give yourself some false sense of being eligible because you overlooked a source of income. So take your time going through the table, and so you don't overlook anything. And then corresponding to that table in section 2 of the application, for each income source, we'll let you know exactly what's required to document that income. Now, Mark, thanks for your patience. Sorry, it's taking me a minute. In that example, would you take the average of the whole year if your income is not steady throughout the year? We're looking at your last year's tax returns. So, if you have a pattern that we can show that shows that it's not steady, we can take that into account. We typically have to kind of look at the last 5 pay stubs. But if you can show that that's really not reflective of what you make in a year, then we can consider that. So I don't know exactly, you know, everyone's different, everyone's circumstances are unique. I'm hesitant to say, yes, we'll take the average, or no, we won't take the average. I mean, it's going to depend on exactly what you give to us and what your circumstances are. But I guess I would say that if it's not steady, that should be reflected, I would think, in your taxes, and that's something that you could call to our attention in the application, actually, if you feel like your last 5 pay stubs are not representative of what you actually make in a year. Similar to, okay, so you're self-employed. So if you're self-employed, that means you're going to have to fill out a self-employment profit and loss statement in the application. That's towards the back of the application. You're going to document, you know, your revenue source, your cost of sales, what your expenses are, and you're going to have to provide supporting documentation for all of those things. And then I'm just trying to remember here, you have to do it for, forgetting off the top of my head, but I think you have to provide the one for the prior year as well, depending on whether or not you filed taxes. So you will have to, and if you anticipate changes, you'll have to fill out a profit and loss statement for the future year. So take a look at the profit and loss statements, which you will have to fill out, and we can work from those and trying to figure out exactly what your income is. But I know with self-employed folks, definitely takes a little bit more work, and trying to figure out exactly what someone makes is a little bit trickier. So we'll work through that with you. But you will have to fill out those profit and loss statements and provide supporting documentation. So just like income, assets are can be, you know, varied and different. And so there's an asset table in the application that you want to spend some time going through. Just as with income, you know, you don't want to overlook something. There is an asset limit, which is $75,000. And assets, I should note, this one comes up with some, I don't want to say regularity, but I've certainly seen this question before where households will say, you know, well, what about a payment that is a down payment assistance from a friend or a family member, or what if it's even my own money that I plan to use towards the down payment? Let's say they say, I have $100,000 in the bank, but I intend to use 30,000 of that as a down payment. So really my assets are 70,000. And the answer to that is no. You know, even money that would be used as a down payment does need to be counted towards the asset limit. Other types of assets that households may have, which need to be documented, are checking accounts or savings accounts. I think those are probably the most common assets that people have. They may also have money transfer applications like Venmo or PayPal. I know a lot of people use those these days. I know I do. And those function much as a checking or checking account would. You can receive payments through them. You can make payments through them. You might have a certificate of deposit, where you put away money with the bank and you can't touch it for a certain period of time. Typically, they do a little bit better than like a savings account would in terms of the interest that they generate on account of the fact that you can't access it for some time. That's another type of asset that people may have. They might have retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs. Now that one's a head scratcher for a lot of people, or an eyebrow raiser, which I totally get. Someone might say, hey, I'm 35 years old, or I'm 40 years old. I'm not touching that money for 25 or 30 more years. Why would you count that? That's there for retirement, and I have no plans to access it. And I hear you. I understand your point. It's a valid one, and yet the program says that we have to count it. We have to count the net cash value. The fact that you may not be intending to access it, and that you would even probably likely pay a penalty if you accessed it early, doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't if you wanted to. Now, there are exceptions to that, like if you would have to, I think, leave your job or something, or retire to access it, that can be an exception. But for most folks, even if they don't intend to access that money, they technically could. And because of that, we have to count the net cash value. So you'd have to get a statement from your administrator of the account that says what the net cash value is were you to access it now. You may have, ownership of stocks or bonds, or even real estate as another type of asset. And as I said before, real estate's the biggest asset most people own. There's whether it's, a place you're living or something that you own for purposes of renting as an investment property, you still can't have owned a home in the last 3 years unless you qualify for one of those 3 exceptions that we talked about. And even then, if you currently own it, you still will have to sell it. You'd have to have it under purchase and sale before you can sign a purchase and sale for one of these units. So, I think that's as much as I'll say about assets. Just like income, there's various sources of assets that people can have. So just take your time going through the asset table and the application to make sure that you don't overlook anything. I should say that we don't count like personal assets. So, a jewelry collection or cars or other personal assets, we're not, we don't need to see documentation relative to those. We don't count those. Now, with your lottery application, you do have to submit a mortgage pre-approval. That's something that can take some time. And pre-approval means pre-approval. It doesn't mean pre-qualification. So because that is something that can take some time, that is something where I recommend that if you are interested in this opportunity, I would reach out to a loan officer relatively soon and begin that process of getting your pre-approval. There are mortgage standards that need to be met in this program. So the ultimate product, the loan commitment that you get, will have to meet these standards, which are in our information packet. Okay, they're on page 8 of our information packet. I would recommend when you go to a bank to begin this process of getting your pre-approval, make a photocopy of this page 8, which is entitled Mortgage Pre-Approval Standards. Make a copy, print out an extra one, bring it to the bank and say, hey, I'm interested in this affordable housing opportunity. I need a pre-approval. Ultimately, if I get to move forward, I'm going to need a commitment. Here are the standards that have to be met. Is this something that you can provide? And give it to them. You may also want to print out a copy of the deed rider from our website, which again is www.sebhousing, and bring that as well and show that to them. The idea being here that you want to go to a bank that when it comes time to get your commitment, they're actually going to be able to deliver. Okay, and they're not going to say, oh, I didn't realize that it had to do this, or I didn't realize it couldn't be that, or what's that requirement? We can't provide that. You want to go to someone who knows as much information up front so that when it comes time to get the loan, they can deliver. For that reason, we also recommend, you can go to whomever you want. You can go to whomever you want. There aren't any rules that say you have to go to such and such person or such and such bank or anything like that. You can go to the person of your choosing. But I do think it is in your best interest to go to someone who has affordable housing experience, who has loaned on these types of homes before, because they're going to know these requirements and they're going to know the best products to offer. And you're going to have that much more comfort that when you need that loan, they're going to be able to deliver. Rather than going to maybe Uncle Joe, who's a great guy and maybe a great, at what he does, but he's never, worked on affordable housing before and isn't totally sure of the requirements. And when it comes time to get a loan commitment, he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't deliver." So I recommend going to someone who has affordable housing experience. You can look lenders up by geographic area. We provide a website on that page, on the mortgage pre-approval standards page in the information packet. It's, can I copy and paste this now? It's the www.mhp.net/1-mortgage. You can find it in the information packet. If you go on that website, you'll be able to look up lenders by region, and those are all people who are lenders familiar with affordable housing and should be able to get you a great product that will meet the program requirements and hopefully meet your needs. Again, you go to anyone, you can go to someone else if you want to, but these are just our recommendations. Can a non-household member co-sign on the mortgage? No, only members of the applying household can sign the mortgage. And as I said before, any monies you've received as a down payment assistance do count towards the asset limit. So with that said, if you are submitting your application, you are a first-time home buyer, you've met that criteria, you are under the income and asset limits, you have your pre-approval, you don't have a financial interest in this development, you're not a related party, great. You hopefully probably will qualify for the lottery. So let's talk a little bit about what that's going to look like and how this process kind of unfolds from there. So I guess as part of that, I would say get your application in early. There's a lot of documentation that is required, and the vast majority of households don't submit a 100% complete application on the first try, either because they miss certain things or overlook things, or because even if they submit absolutely everything that's requested in the application, sometimes the documents that a household submits elicit or raise further questions, and so then they have to go back and maybe get more documentation. Classic example is household submits the last 3 bank statements as is required from their checking account, but when we start reviewing it, we say, well, what are all these deposits going into your checking account? You've told us about this job you have over here, but we can see those going in, but you've got all these other deposits that we can't correlate to your job or anything else you've told us about. So please, document those for us. So for that reason, getting your application in well in advance of the deadline is probably beneficial. The application deadline is January 5th. So you got about a month, a little less than a month. And with the holidays coming up too, that's even more reason to try and get that in. Implicit in that, I think, or hope, is that, submission of your application is not a one bite at the apple type of scenario. So if you submit it once and it's not complete, we don't say, hey, too bad, sorry, try again next time. No, we'll say, here's what's missing, and please work on getting these documents if you want to finalize your application. And you can do that as many times as you need until the deadline. Some folks takes 3, 4, 5, 6 submissions to get a totally complete application. So getting it in early is really only to your benefit. You don't want to be scrambling at the 11th hour trying to get documents that are missing. If you're not eligible, we'll let you know why. And if you are eligible, we'll let you know that too. And when you're eligible, we'll send you a letter that says, here's your lottery application number. It's A.blank blank blank. That number is simply an anonymous identifier to be used when we run the lottery to keep your name out of it and private. It has nothing to do with where you are in the lottery or your chances of moving forward or anything like that. And in that letter, we're also, note a couple other details from what you put in your application, like what household type you are and, when the lottery is and how to, the YouTube link for the lottery, etc. So you just want to take a moment to go through that letter we send to you to make sure that the information that we put in there is consistent with what you think you put in your application. I should note that when we do the lot, so these are all 2-bedroom units, and in this program, we have to give priority to larger household types who need 2 bedrooms, who are appropriately sized for 2 bedrooms, rather than smaller households who might like 2 bedrooms but don't really need 2 bedrooms. So you'll see when you fill out the lottery application, one of the questions is going to ask you, what household type are you? And you can either be a type 2 household, which generally means you're someone who the program would say needs 2 bedrooms, or you can be a type 1 household, which is a household who the program would say only needs 1 bedroom. In the application, there's sort of like a bold for each, and then you just find your composition of household, check off the box next to it, and move on. It's not something you have to spend a lot of time with. But as an example, there are various compositions of households that make up each type. But, a 4-person or a 3-person household is always going to be a type 2 household, i.e. a household that's appropriately sized or needs 2 bedrooms. Similarly, a parent and child is a type 2 household. The household of the program would say needs 2 bedrooms. Conversely, 2 heads of household or a single-person household is a household who the program would generally say really only needs 1 bedroom. They might like 2 bedrooms, but they don't need 2 bedrooms. Now, you might say, well, what's the relevance of that? Well, the relevance of this household type bears out when we do the lottery and where you are on the waiting list. Sorry, I'm seeing another one of these acronyms from someone watching, VOA. I don't know what that means, so if that's intended for me, please let me know, and I'll be happy to respond. So when we do the lottery, everyone gets picked. Okay, so oftentimes when people think about lotteries, they think, who are the winners, who are the losers, who gets picked. And these lotteries are a little bit different because there aren't winners and losers, and everyone gets picked, and everyone's going to have a position on the waiting list. So we do the lottery, we put all the lottery application numbers in a box. Again, those numbers will be the A dot blank 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 that we sent to you when you were deemed eligible for the lottery. We'll put all those numbers in the box. I'll pull them out one by one and show them up on the screen as I go. Now, is that the exact order you're going to have moving forward? And the answer is not necessarily, because there are these different priorities we have to implement. So, for example, if the very first number pulled in the lottery is a type 1 household, but then the other, let's say there are a total of 6 households in the lottery, the other 5 are type 2 households, that type 1 household is not going to be number 1 on the waiting list. They're not going to have first priority, first opportunity for one of these units, because all of the bigger type 2 households will be higher on the waiting list because they're households who the program wants to make sure have priority. So when I do the lottery drawing, it's generally, obviously better to be picked earlier, but that's not necessarily the end of the story. We don't have the full picture right there in that moment because we don't know, who's a type 1 or who's a type 2 household. So now the good news is within an hour or 2 or maybe 3 of running the lottery, I will then sort the results and create the waiting list. The waiting list I will send to you. So you should get them if you have email. That same night. If you don't have email, I'll send them to you in snail mail, and you get them, hopefully 2 days later, maybe sooner. I send you the waiting list. The waiting list will have your lottery application number, and then you can see exactly where you are relative to other households who were in the lottery. So, if you're in the 5th position, then there are 4 households ahead of you who are going to have opportunity before you to purchase one of these units. So again, in that vein, there aren't winners and losers. Everyone's in the lottery. Everyone gets picked. Everyone has a waiting list position. You get the waiting list the night of the lottery, and the waiting list show you exactly where you are relative to other households in the lottery, which will determine the order in which you can move forward in the next steps of this program. And the next steps after the lottery is done is SEB kind of steps back from the process. We're still involved, but some new and different players become involved, specifically the sales team for the developer. Okay, so they will then kind of, because again, we're off-site, we're not a real estate agent, we're an off-site affordable housing lottery consultant. So at that point after the lottery, households would get the opportunity to start working with the sales team, and the order from the lottery will be maintained. So the number one household from the lottery will put in touch with the sales team. We'll put everyone in touch with each other, and that household can then start working with the sales team to reserve the unit of their choice. Now, there are 4 units, right? And so the real benefit of being the number one household on the waiting list is you get to choose from the 4. Maybe you want the one, whatever you want, you could choose from the 4. And that's the benefit of being the number one household on the waiting list. Once you've chosen, and probably as part of that, you'd meet with the sales team. You might go to the site, you might look at the units or a model unit, look at floor plans, talk about when the units are going to be ready. You select your unit. You'll reserve it with a deposit of $500. When you reserve your unit, you'll set a date by which you're going to sign the purchase and sale agreement, which will probably be at least 10 days, maybe longer. Then you'll sign the purchase and sale agreement, at which point 1.5% of the sales price is due, minus the $500 you've put down. When you sign the purchase and sale agreement, you set a date for getting a mortgage commitment and ultimately closing. And those aspects of the process kind of flow pretty similar to how any market rate unit would sell. There is absolutely nothing wrong with, nor is it discouraged. In fact, it is encouraged. If you want to hire an attorney, if you're one of the lucky households from the lottery who gets to move forward and you want to hire an attorney, you should. Buying a house is a big purchase, and you want to understand exactly what your kind of rights and obligations are and what the different paperwork you'll be signing means. So if you want to have, if you want to hire an attorney to kind of just help lead you through certain aspects of the process, that's allowed, that's permitted. We don't provide one, but you can hire one on your own initiative. That's perfectly permitted. Once the first household has reserved their unit, well, now there's 3 units left to choose from, and so the next household can choose from those 3. And once they've reserved that unit, then they kind of move forward in the next steps of the process. And now the third household on the waiting list could choose from the remaining 2 units. And so that's how it goes until the 4th and final unit is reserved, and then this process kind of wraps up. If you weren't one of the lucky households who's able to move forward, there will be another lottery. There will be more units. Maybe you apply for one of those. Households do have to maintain eligibility all the way up through closing. Okay, so SEB Housing will stay involved in this process, even though we kind of step back from it a little bit after the lottery. We do stay involved, because when you get your mortgage commitment, after you sign your purchase and sale, but before you close on the home, you will have to update your file with us to show that you're still eligible. So it's not a bad idea. In fact, it's a good idea. If you're get some more pay stubs, update your bank statements, keep your file current and active, so that when you have to undergo this update, you've got those things on hand, and it should be relatively easy. Again, that's just because the program requires, sometimes months and months can go by between when the lottery is and when a household actually closes on a unit. And as I said, the program requires that households maintain eligibility up through closing. So we do have to do this second review, and usually that happens about a month before you close on the unit. And if you're eligible then that should be the end of it. You shouldn't need to undergo any further screenings unless there's some other big significant delay. Once you purchase the home, you're done with screenings, you're done with, submitting documentation to SEB. It's yours. Hopefully you love it and live there for a long time. I should say that, and I meant to mention this earlier, that, households can finance up to 97% of the purchase price, but not more. So 3% is going to have to come from you. And of that 3%, half must come from your own funds. Okay, so half must come from 1.5% must come from your own funds. The 3% is just at about 93.66. Okay, so that part you can't finance, the rest you can, but you will have to come up with a little under $10,000, and half of that, about 46.83, has got to come from your own personal funds, not as a gift from a family member or something like that. I should note that all of these homes come with a deed rider that has certain restrictions, that places restrictions on the home. For example, it's got to remain your principal residence. This is not a home you get to just like Airbnb or Vrbo or something like that. There are restrictions about refinancing the home. It needs to be approved by Mass Housing, who's the monitoring agent for this project. Certain capital improvements may be allowed, subject to prior approval. This is all brand new construction, so I doubt that would be needed. You're not going to probably need, a new roof or something like that, or a new boiler. But if you needed to, that you would need to get prior approval. But again, shouldn't come up given that it's new construction. And probably the biggest thing that the deed rider does is it limits the amount for which a household can resell the unit. So, this is not an opportunity to buy a unit at a, very low price and then turn it around and sell it for $800,000 a year later. You can probably sell it for more than what you bought it for. There's a formula, and I can't tell you exactly what that'll look like because it depends on, new numbers coming out every year. So it depends on what year you sell it. You can expect to probably be able to sell it for a little bit more, or, substantially more than what you bought it for, depending on how long you own it and how area median incomes change over time. And you do need to sell it for to another affordable buyer. Mark, say you wanted to rent it in 10 years, could you, or you always, does it always need to be your primary residence? Yeah, it needs to be your primary residence, whether it's now or in 10 years. Now, there may be, if there's some serious extenuating circumstance that, forced you to be in a position where maybe you needed to move for some period of time and you're looking to rent it, just to kind of offset some of your costs. That may be something that the monitoring agent would approve and say, hey, this is an extenuating documented circumstance. This isn't just someone saying, I want to just rent out my, affordable unit willy-nilly. But typically, the general answer is no, you can't rent it. You'd have to have some really good reason, and you need approval of that reason. All right, I think I've talked for going on 55 minutes. I think I've said as much as I want to say. Are there any other questions that people have? I should note as well that, a lot of times households don't know exactly what their questions are until they start filling out the application. That's totally fine. Reach out to us. That's what we're here for. And we understand that, a lot of times questions arise as you start kind of digging through and trying to produce documents and answering some of the prompts that are in there. So if you do have questions, you can, email is the best. but if you want to call, you can call us too, obviously. But email is probably the fastest way and the easiest way to get a response. Email info@sebhousing.com, and we're happy to work through this with you. This is a great opportunity. These are, beautiful looking units in a nice development in a nice town at a great price. So we hope households will be excited about it and that we will see your applications arriving soon. I'll stick around for just a minute here to see if any other questions come up, but if not, we look forward to hearing from you. We hope. Okay. Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.